To the second Gaming Advisory Committee meeting. It's Wednesday, April 28th. Our first meeting was on April 14th. And then we're planning on having hopefully one final meeting on May 5th. However, if we're not completed, then we will come up with another date as well. As a reminder, everybody, I'm Phil Talon. I'm the chairman of this board. We have 5 appointees from the mayor, 5 appointees from the council. I believe everybody is present except for Councilman Torres. I'll remind everybody that we have right now requests for the Gaming Advisory Committee. We have requests of $1.3 million due to COVID and revenue changes with the city. At this time, we have a total amount of $309,351.81 that we're able to give out to not-for-profit organizations. So with that, we decided last meeting to have a preliminary max of $10,000 per organization, and then at the end of the committee meetings, if there's additional funding available, we can try and go back and increase, and if we're short money, we may have to go back and cut. So just because we agree to a certain amount preliminarily, that could change before the final approval. We are working through each application one at a time, and just reminding people that are watching from home that although we will be following Robert's rules when we have the final motion for approval, at this time we're just talking through and putting preliminary numbers down. So we are not having motions and seconds and things of that nature for the time being. With that, let's go ahead and get started where we left off after the first meeting. Unless anybody has any comments or anything prior to beginning. All right, I should have welcomed everybody, but welcome back. We left off in the last meeting. We had 2 applications that we said we were going to come back to. The first one on the list was 4 Quarters for Life. They were asking for $15,000 in our application. There were some folks in the committee that were asking questions about, is this in Hammond? Are there Hammond members involved? Is it just a flag football tournament, or is there more to it? Since that time, I've reached out to Africa Tarver, who knows some of the folks that are running the organization. She said it is Hammond. It is much more than flag football. It's about leaders in the community working with youth on different things of just becoming better leaders, becoming good citizens in the community, learning about leadership and respect and things of that nature. So with that, do we have any suggestions for a grant amount for 4 Quarters for Life?
Mr. President, I'd suggest that we do 5,000.
All right, we have a suggestion for 5,000.
I agree.
We have agreement, seconds. Are there anybody else that have any comments?
None at this time.
All right, let's mark down 5,000 on that one, and we'll go to the next one that we left off on the first meeting. We were talking about Girls on the Run of Northwest Indiana. I think we had some folks that wanted to make sure that with COVID, they were still in operation, that it is a Hammond group where the money is going to Hammond girls. And we noticed Africa Tarver, who works for the city, was a board member, so we reached out to her. She said they are still in operation. It is a Hammond group. They are still working with all Hammond girls. And so with that, do we have any suggestions for a grant amount for Girls on the Run of Northwest Indiana?
I'd like to recommend $7,500.
We have a recommendation for $7,500. We have a second.
I would agree, Mr. President.
More agreements? Is there anybody with any other comments? Okay, we'll mark them down for $7,500 and go to the next one. Thank you. Next is Greater Hammond Community Services. This one, with the our work study session that we had before this, we wanted a little bit more specifics as far as what the money is going to be used for. It was very vaguely described in in the application. So I put it on this that I'm going to actually reach out to Michelle Anderson, who's the primary contact for this application, and get more information on what the funding will be used for. So we will go ahead and just pass on this one right now and get back for this at the May 5th meeting. Same for the next one, which is the Habitat for Humanity. There were questions on, we wanted to verify what the address is. We did see an address in here, but we weren't sure if it was the actual address where they want to build the home. And again, we talked through this in the work study session. So with that, I'm going to reach out to them and find out what address they're looking at, and also make sure the timeline matches. Is it going to be this year or is it going to be next year? So we're going to find that out as well. So we will pass on this and go to the next one. The next application is for the Hammond Academy of Science and Technology Athletics. Their application asks for $35,000. Do we have any suggestions?
Mr. President, I suggest that we hold for additional clarification with all the stimulus funds that's been issued. Will that be able to help out with part of this? So we could get maybe additional clarification, so we could focus on what assistance they truly need.
And Mr. President, sorry I failed before, Darlene. I have to recuse myself because I sit on this board.
And I do as well.
Okay, so Councilwoman Venez and Marty Wilgus will recuse themselves. We have a suggestion to pass on this for the time being. There was some comments that they may be receiving a significant amount of money through some of the grants and programs that have recently been announced. So with that, does anybody have any other comments?
Second that motion.
We have a second, we have an agreement. All right, we will pass on this for right now. And if any information changes on that with some of the grant money that we heard they're receiving, then we will come back to this. Next is the Hammond Community Theater. They're asking for $4,200. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Got the motion from Councilman Spitali.
Second.
Second from Andrea. We have a motion to do the $4,200. And again, we don't have to do official motions, but it's good to kind of use that format so we know what we're saying. And does anybody else have any changes or comments? Okay, let's write down 4,200 and we will move on to the next one. The Hammond Community Watch is the next one on the list.
And I have to recuse myself, Mr. President.
Councilwoman Venez will recuse herself from this conversation. Their application amounts for $25,000. And do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, I would suggest awarding the 10K amount.
We have a suggestion for the maximum $10,000 amount.
I agree, Mr. President.
There's another agreement on the suggestion. Anybody else have any comments, concerns? Okay, let's mark them down for $10,000, and we will move on to the next one. Next is the Hammond Education Foundation. They have made a request of $20,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, I suggest the maximum of 10,000. This group provides the acorn grants and the seedling grants and assists students with scholarships that are going to college. I think it's a very good organization.
I agree, Mr. President.
We have suggestion of the max for 10,000, and again, it's a current max for now. Doesn't mean it can't change by the end of this process, but current max for now, 10,000. We have another person in agreement. Is there any other thoughts? Okay, let's mark them down for 10,000 for now, and we will move on to the next one. The next application is for the Hammond Family YMCA. I asked the committee to pass on this for right now, because we are in negotiation right now with the Hammond YMCA on a project, and the funding would be significant. So is everybody okay with passing on this application for now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Let's move that to the side, and we will go to the next one. Hammond Firefighters Local 566. They are asking, their application is for $40,000. Somebody had brought up at the first meeting, I believe, or at one of the work study sessions, we have made a commitment to them in the past that through this gaming advisory committee that we would pledge so much money. I believe what's left of our pledge was $40,000. So what the suggestion was is that we do a $10,000 max at this time, and then at next year's allocation, we potentially meet the remainder of what we pledged to this organization. Is there any thoughts on that, suggestions, comments?
I say we do the 10,000, Mr. President.
I agree.
All right, everybody's in agreement. Let's mark down 10,000. We'll go to the next one. Next is the Hammond Firefighters Memorial. They have an application request for $10,000. Is there any suggestions from the committee?
I recommend we do 5,000.
We have a suggestion from both Andrea and Melissa for the $5,000. Any other thoughts?
I agree.
Everybody else is agreeing also. So let's mark them down for the 5,000 for now, and we will move on to the next one. Next is the Hammond Hermits Athletic Association. Their application amount is for $17,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
I would suggest, Mayor, Mr. President, that we do $5,000. I'm a visionary.
This just got really uncomfortable. So if Mayor Tom's watching, nothing to do with that whatsoever. We have Marty Wilgus is suggesting that we do $5,000 for the Hammond Hermits. Do we have any other thoughts or comments?
I agree.
We have agreement?
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement. All right.
Mr.
With that-
President,
Yes.
and I'd like to suggest that we remain consistent with the rest of the baseball leagues throughout the remainder of the list.
Councilman Venez suggests we stay consistent since a lot of these programs are baseball programs throughout the city. So I don't know if everybody else is in agreement with that.
Yes.
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 Very good. Then we'll remain consistent going forward. Thank you, Councilwoman Venez. Next is the Hammond Hurricanes. They made an application request of $25,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
I would suggest 5,000 to stay consistent with our youth sports at this time, and if there's funding left, we can always go back and take a look at it.
We have a suggestion of 5,000. Any other thoughts or comments?
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement. And it does remain consistent with the sports that we just talked about. So we'll mark them down for 5,000 for now, and we'll move on to the next one. Next is the Hammond Mohawk Athletic and Conservation Club. They have made a request for $3,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
How about that? That's the $8,000 one first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did do that. I apologize. Their first application, they have two applications in. One is for $8,000, and it was for a parade, and information has been brought to the committee that the parade will not go forward this year. So with that, I think we suggested that we pass on that one. So unless anybody else has any other thoughts on it, we'll pass on that first one, which is what confused me. And we'll go to their next application, which is, again, the Hammond Mohawks, where they are requesting $3,000, and this one is specific to their Adopt a Sailor program. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, my suggestion would be to award the full $3,000.
We have a suggestion to award the $3,000. Any other thoughts?
I
I
agree.
agree.
Okay, everybody's in agreement. We'll mark them down for $3,000 and move on to the next one. By the way, for those that are watching from home, we plan on going till 6 o'clock p.m. and to get as far as we can. And then we'll, like I mentioned earlier, we'll finish up on May 5th. Next is Hammond Reeds. Their application is for $10,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr.
I suggest that we, grant that amount.
We have a suggestion from Melissa Farrell for the $10,000.
I agree.
We have an agreement from Marty Wilgus. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments, changes? All right, let's mark them down for $10,000, which is their application amount and happens to be the max, and we will move on to the next one. Next is the Hammond Youth Golf Academy, doing business as the First Tee program, or other people might know them as the First Tee program, which is why I bring that up. Their application amount is for $2,500. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, I recommend we give him the 2,500.
I agree.
Recommendation for $2,500. We have an agreement. Any other thoughts, concerns? Very good. Let's mark them down for $2,500. And we will move on to the next application. Next is the Haven House. Their application amount is for $9,244. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
I would suggest 9244.
I would agree,
Agree.
Mr. President.
I agree.
Sounds like we have a lot of folks in agreement with the full amount that they requested. Any other comments? Okay, we will mark down $9,244 and move on to the next one. Next is the Hessville Commerce and Community and Creative, also known as HC3. They have officially changed their request amount to $20,000. So that is their request. Do we have any suggestions? Oh, I think we have some abstentions in the group,
Yes,
correct?
Mr. President, I have to abstain.
Mr. President, I would abstain.
So Marty and Darlene will be abstaining. Anybody else? Okay, with that, do we have any suggestions for the HC3 application?
Mr. President,
I heard two. I'll go with Dan because this is the first time I'm hearing them in a bit. So Dan, what do you have?
10,000.
Suggestion of 10,000. Eileen?
second.
All right, so we have two people suggesting 10,000. Any other thoughts or comments?
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
All right, let's mark them down for 10,000. Next is the Hessville Historical Society. Their application amount is for $4,000. What suggestions do we have from the committee? Okay, we have
I
a
agree.
suggestion from Dan, agreement from Janet. Any other thoughts, suggestions, changes? Okay, let's mark them down for 4,000. Next is the Hessville Little League. Their application is in for, their application amount is for $25,000. Do we have suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President,
Consistent with our other athletic teams, I move that we grant them 5,000.
I agree.
I agree.
All right, staying consistent, we will mark down 5,000 for Hessville Little League. All right, next is Humane Indiana. In our work study session, it was asked that we receive more information about specifically this application because it does list it in Highland. A lot of us know the Humane Society headquarters is in Munster, at least one of them. So we want to get more information as far as what specifically this money will be used for. So I will take that on and have that for the meeting on May 5th. Pretty good? All right, put that one to the side. Next is Impact. They have made a request for $10,000. Do we have suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, I have to recuse myself from this vote.
Okay, Marty will recuse himself. Do we have any suggestions from anybody else in the committee?
I would recommend the full 10,000.
Okay, we have a recommendation from
agree.
Andrea for 10,000.
I agree.
Everybody seems to be in agreement. Okay, we'll mark them down for 10,000 for now. And go to the next one. Next is the Lakeshore Cal Ripken Babe Ruth League. Their application is for $14,430. Suggestions from the committee.
Mr. President, in order to stay consistent, I would suggest 5,000.
Eileen is suggesting 5,000. Anybody else have comments?
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Agreements? Okay. Then we will mark them down for 5,000, staying consistent with the other sports organizations. Next is Meals on Wheels for Northwest Indiana. Their application amount is for $43,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, this organization does a good job, but in our work study session, it came to our attention that even though they deliver meals to those that need them the most, that may not be able to get out of their home or travel, to mostly the elderly, there is a charge of $5 and some odd cents. I would suggest to the board that we go ahead and fund it at the $10,000, the request, but the caveat would be that that money be used to give meals to residents of the city of Hammond at no cost.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
So the suggestion is that we would give them the grant of $10,000, but upon that grant, we're going to put a restriction on there that we want the meals to go to Hammond residents, and we want those meals to be free for Hammond residents. So
Correct.
there will be no charge.
Correct.
And it sounded like I heard of a lot of agreements. Is there anybody else that has any comments? Okay, we will mark that down. Okay, next is Mental Health America. I have to abstain from voting on this one. I am a board member for Mental Health America. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
I would suggest the maximum of 10,000.
I would agree, Mr. President.
Okay, we have a
agree.
suggestion for 10,000 and second, and I'm hearing some agreements. Are there any other comments? Okay, let's mark them down for the max 10,000. Moving on to the next one is the Mount Zion Drive A.R. Burns Pleasant View Plaza. Their application is for $8,520. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Go ahead.
Mr. President, if I may ask a question for those who have served on the board previously, since it's my first year, have we typically paid for transportation before for this?
In the past,
Facility.
we have given money to them. My suggestion was gonna be 1,500, and that was for them to go to Horseshoe.
That was another question I
I
had.
didn't think it was appropriate to go to Four Winds when we're using our gaming dollars for them to go to a different casino.
So
The
for
other events are in Illinois, so we should keep the money here in Hammond or in Indiana.
So for the folks that are tuning in from home, their application is a request for transportation. It's essentially entertainment, transportation to different places for the folks at Mount Zion. And 3 out of the 4 are not in Hammond. So I think I'm hearing a suggestion for, did you say 1,500, Sharon?
For the Hammond trip.
For the Hammond trip.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Agree.
All right, we have a lot of agreements for 1,500 for the Hammond trip. Any other comments? All right, let's mark them down for 1,500. Next is Northgate Church. They have put an application request in for $30,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, I know that this local community group does a lot. They give away turkeys and food pantry and community events to the local Hammond community. I would suggest at this time maybe 5,000, and then we can always revisit it at a later date.
We have a suggestion for 5,000 for Northgate Church. Any other comments or thoughts?
I would agree, Mr. President.
Another agreement?
I agree.
Okay, very good. Let's mark them down for 5,000. And, you know, in our work study session, we talked about this because the limited amount of funding that we have this year, it's going to be really tough. In fact, doing the math, I think we're going to be a little over what we actually have available, but in the end, we'll have to come back. So I think in a lot of ways, it makes sense to try and be consistent in some ways, and so appreciate that. We'll mark them down for 5,000 right now, and we'll go on to the next one. Next is Optimus Club of Hammond. They have an application amount for $15,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President? Oops, go ahead.
Was anybody recusing themselves, or no? Okay, Melissa, go ahead.
Just gonna say that it's consistent with our other youth sports and to just $5,000.
Okay,
Actually,
I
I
don't think
would
this is-
prefer to pass on this because they're using the money to give to Hesper Little League, the First Tee. We're already giving money to them.
let me just because obviously people at home don't have the application. So in the request amount, it says they're gonna fund the following groups: Hesper Little League, First Tee, Challenger Learning Center, Hammond Area Career Center, and if approved, by the fire department, they would sponsor a baby box. So I could tell you.
And I would like to withdraw that suggestion.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like 3 out of the 5 we are already funding. And I know we did that in the first meeting too. There was another organization that was trying to take money, get money from us, and then they were gonna also donate. We obviously would prefer just to give the money directly to organizations coming from this group. So, the request is taken back. Do we have any other suggestions?
I would agree.
I agree.
So we have a suggestion to pass. Anybody else have any comments?
Mr. President,
Yes, Katrina.
how much does a baby box actually cost? Because if that's the one thing that they, could help with, that, if it's approved by the fire department, that we can help with that. Because that is not something other than what we've given to.
That is,
Mr. President, the only thing I would add to that is that if that was the intent of this board, that we would do that directly for the fire department.
Correct. I agree.
I agree.
so how about we do this? Approved by the Hammond Fire Department. Why don't we, how about I will gather more information on the cost of a baby box. I think, hate using that term, by the way. but I understand it's a great, it is a good thing if it's used appropriately to stop from children to be discarded when parents are struggling. Why don't we find out what the cost is, but also, let me reach out to the Hammond Fire Department and see where they stand on this. I happen to have a meeting with them next week, Monday, so let me have a conversation with them, and for now, if Katrina, if you're okay with that, I'll bring the information back for the next meeting. Okay, so we'll put pass for the time being, but it sounds like one thing we all are in agreement on is if we're gonna give them money, it's gonna be specific to maybe that process and not the other organizations that we're already giving money to. Okay. All right, next is Prom Genie. Their application is for $15,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
I would suggest 7,500 at this time. I do know of this group. They do provide young ladies with, dresses and hairstyle, and those that cannot afford to go to prom. But I'm not sure where we stand with prom at this point, if it's going to be conducted this year or not. Or my second suggestion is hold to see if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I would suggest, Mr. President, that we hold until we find out actually if there's going to be a prom.
Okay, I'm noticing on the application that the CEO is Helen Lewis, but one of the primary contacts is Shannon Morris Smith, who happens to work for the city, so we can very easily have a conversation with her to find out more information. So if the committee's in agreement with that, I will mark this down to have a conversation with her, and then we'll bring that back at the May 5th meeting. Is that good?
Yes.
That's good.
Okay. I will make sure I have a conversation with Shannon. Okay. Next one is Pulaski Park Neighborhood Association.
And I have to recuse myself.
Melissa will be recusing herself from this conversation. Do we have any suggestions from the committee? Oh, by the way, their application amount is for $10,000.
I suggest we give the full amount of 10,000.
I would agree, Mr. President.
I agree.
Suggestion for 10, several agreements. Any other comments or questions, changes? Okay, let's mark them down for 10,000. Next is St. Casimir School. Somehow my application got out of order. I probably did that to myself. St. Casimir is requesting $10,345.50. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, I was in a meeting earlier today with a group of engineers, and I had specifically asked about whether there was any funding from either the federal dollars or local state dollars for the pandemic. for private schools. And since Hammond does have quite a few. And he had indicated to me that he was just made aware of that there's grant funding through the state specifically for HVAC systems, which kind of rings a bell to me and some of the other material I read. So what I would ask is that we take a pass until we can get further information, because I looked at St. Casimir specifically and what their grant money was to be used for, and they're kind of doing the COVID thing, keeping classrooms safe, aid in directing school traffic, and provide enhanced campus security, that type of stuff. So maybe if they were able to get a grant in dollars they would have had to spend in HVAC, those dollars being saved because of getting a grant then could be applied to the other uses that they're asking for.
So your suggestion is to pass for now?
Pass for now,
See
yes.
if we can get more information on that, what you just mentioned.
Yes. And I will, if the board, I will check and get the information to see what may be available for the parochial schools across the city.
Any other comments? All right, let's do that. We'll pass for now and have Marty will speak to the folks over there and see what opportunities they're getting through some of the different funds that are grants and monies that's become available due to COVID and just money being available. So we will move on to the next one. St. John Bosco School, the grant application amount is $14,750.
Mr. President, would this be the same? Would there be grant money available to this school? But this is for iPads, it seems like. I don't know if someone has any additional information on that.
So it sounds like if you're gonna find out information, Marty, about the other, could you see if they're getting
I will.
funds? Okay, so you wanna do the same thing? We can kind of put an asterisk on it, we'll pass for now and gather more information.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay. Are we saying the same for St. John the Baptist Catholic Parish?
I would say yes, Mr. President. I'd be more than happy to gather all the information on federal and local state grant money that could be available because of the pandemic for these schools.
Okay, so just so folks listening at home, we're gonna gather more information on what money is becoming available now to some of our local churches and schools, and we will come back to this on the May 5th meeting. I'm glad you have homework too, Marty. I'm not the only one. Okay? Seems like I'm doing a lot here with all the homework. Okay, next is St. Joseph Catholic Church. Their application amount for $50,000, and Marty, is this similar?
It is similar, like I said, I just learned of it today, Mr. President, so I know the one topic that was discussed was grant money for HVAC systems to be improved, but I will do a thorough search and talk to the right people to see if there's other grant money for other things like iPads and a variety of other tools that all of these schools direly need.
Great, okay, we will pass on that and get more information for St. Joseph Catholic Church. Next is the School City of Hammond Food and Nutrition. They made a request for application amount for $75,000. I know Civil City is receiving $53 million through the CARES Act. I believe School City is getting $41 million through the CARES Act.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if we want to, well, I'll ask for suggestions from the committee.
Mr. President, I would agree wholeheartedly that we, at least for now, take a pass because of the monies that School City is receiving from the state.
I
I
agree.
agree.
Okay, I heard a lot of agreements. Are there any other comments? We will pass knowing they are receiving a significant amount of money through this, the CARES Act that just recently was passed. Next is School City of Hammond Robotics, and they are making an application amount of $30,000. Did I skip one?
No,
No.
Okay,
No?
just making sure.
I don't think so.
All right, what is the suggestions from the committee?
Would this be the same? Are they already
Well,
getting?
I would think this may be different.
Yeah, this would be different. I would suggest 5,000, like we're doing for all the other youth sports or organizations at this time.
I would agree,
You
Mr.
have a
President.
suggestion for
Agree.
5,000? We have several agreements. Is there anybody else that has any comments?
No, agree.
All right, we'll mark them down for 5,000. I think that's staying consistent. Next is Society of St. Vincent de Paul, OLPH. They have an application amount for $1,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
I suggest we give the full 1,000.
We have a suggestion for 1,000. Do we have any
I
other?
agree.
I agree.
A lot of agreements. Again, it makes it pretty easy when the request amount is very low. So it sounds like we're all in agreement. Anybody else have any other comments? Let's go ahead and mark them down for the 1,000. Next is South Shore Arts. Their application amount is for $20,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee? Any suggestions from the
I would
committee?
like to suggest 2,500.
We have a suggestion for 2,500 for South Shore Arts. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments?
I would agree.
You have an agreement? Anybody else?
But given our limited funds this year,
That's the really tough part about what we're doing right now, is obviously with these organizations, you want to give as much money as you can, and we're in a situation where we are extremely limited. So, all right, with that, let's go ahead and mark them down for 2,500 for now, and we will move on to the next one. The next one is the Chicagoland Immigrant Welcome Network. They have put a request in for $2,500.
Mr. President, looking over their application, what they're doing is a lot of what our legal aid clinic is doing. The Hammond Legal Aid Clinic, they have brought someone in just to handle DACA and people getting their naturalization. So I would suggest we pass on this since our own legal aid clinic.
Let me add to that. I believe the Legal Aid Clinic has been, it's part of a different ordinance in that we are funding them on an annual basis. So when Sharon brings up that our Legal Aid Clinic is doing it, it means we're giving money to this process already. So I just want to add that in. But does anybody else have any comments or thoughts?
Well, Mr. President, I sit on the Legal Aid Board, and this was created, Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong, this was created last year, I believe.
Right.
So this is something that the city and the mayor thought that it was badly needed and actually decided to fund and bring in a full-time individual to be able to handle those needs. So I would have to agree with everybody here that that's already being covered by legal aid.
Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and pass on this application, knowing we have a similar organization inside the city of Hammond that is already working through this, this type of process. Next is the Toll Theater Performing Arts. They have a request in for an application for $30,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go. I suggest we give 10,000.
We have
I would agree, Mr. President.
suggestion for the max. We have an agreement. Is there other thoughts?
I agree.
I agree.
Other agreement? I'm hearing a lot of agreements with downtown Hammond, really on the verge of some big things. It's going to be nice that Toll Theater is going to already be established and help be a strong part of that community. We'll go ahead and mark them down for 10,000. Next, we have the Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church. They have an application in for $2,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, I would suggest the 2,000. It looks like the funds are to go to help their vacation Bible school for the youth.
We have a suggestion to give them the $2,000 for their vacation Bible school.
I would agree, Mr. President.
You're in a lot of agreements. I don't think you could vote against it. I don't think it'll work for you, so.
they also provide the trunk or treat and annual Easter egg hunt that they have opened doors.
That's great. Thank you, Melissa. It's good to hear information like that and know they're doing good things. Let's go ahead and mark them down for the 2,000, and we will move on to the next application. Next is United Citizens Association, Inc. They have an application amount request of $13,600. Do we have any suggestions from the committee? And I could tell you in their application, it says they're requesting financial assistance to maintain aesthetic improvements in the Robertsdale community, specifically funds for flower baskets for portions of 119th, install flower baskets from Calumet Avenue to Atchison. They maintain these until the fall. And they're trying to tie into some of the efforts Whiting is doing on their side of the border as well.
Mr. President, I'd like to recommend 7,500.
Okay, we have a recommendation of 7,500. Do we have any other thoughts from the committee?
Agree.
I would agree.
Agree.
Okay, you're in agreements from majority. We'll mark them down for 7,500. All right, next is the Whiting-Robertsdale Chamber of Commerce. They have an application request amount of $50,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, do we know if they're going to be holding their festivals this year? With your question, let me just mention to the folks viewing at home. It says the purpose of this grant is to help ensure the survival of the Chamber of Commerce. The COVID-19 pandemic closed their office for several months and forced them to cancel all of their 2020 events, including their Pierogi Fest, which I think is one of their largest revenue drawers. And membership dues were severely impacted, as most of their merchants also suffered closures or services. So it's not specific to Pierogi Fest. I know that's their revenue generator. I think they're asking for this funding to help with their overall survival of the organization.
Mr. President, I would suggest that we take a pass for now so that we can maybe review and get a little more information. We have other organizations within the city of Hammond that would probably qualify for the same type of funding, and I would be just a little concerned that we're funding one organization and maybe not looking at a much greater picture, because there are a lot of businesses across the city that have taken a really bad beating over the COVID. So that would be my concern.
I agree.
Agree.
Any other comments? We have a suggestion to pass for now and see if we can get some more information on that. Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay, we'll mark them down for pass, and we will have a conversation with them before May 5th. Next is the world's fastest triathlon. I don't know if that's real. You can't just call yourself that unless you have proof. But this is Leon's Triathlon. I don't know if I have to abstain. I'm actually running in the triathlon this year. I'm not part of the organization at all or anything like that. But do we have any suggestions from the committee? Oh, I'm sorry. Their application amount is for $15,000. Do we have any suggestions from the committee?
Mr. President, my suggestion would be to award the full 10,000 max.
We have a suggestion.
A lot of work with military and vets.
So
I
great.
agree.
Yep, they do. I know Leon does a lot with veterans as well. Melissa, great point. So we have a suggestion for the full 10,000 max, and I'm hearing some agreements. Is there any other comments or thoughts? All right, we will mark them down for 10,000. I don't know. I know, Darlene, you were kind of our unofficial calculator earlier, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to try and do it while I talk for a few minutes here.
All right.
So we can do an unofficial tabulation. Now, with that, we still have several groups we're going to hear from and gather more information on, so we won't be able to say whether or not we're going to have more money or less money until we get the final information on the rest, but it would be nice to kind of have a total of where we stand. Let me look really quick and see how many asterisks we have to talk to organization. I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm counting 8 applications that we're going to gather more information on. So that is a decent number that we got to get, more info before we'll know where we stand. While Darlene's doing that, no pressure, we're all looking at you. Reminder to everybody in the public that's watching, the last meeting will be on May 5th. If all goes well, and I think at this point, now that we're through all the applications and just going through the ones we have question marks on, we should be able to have a motion and a second and be able to have a final approval on May 5th. So unless something drastic happens, that should be our final meeting for this year. For those that did not watch the first meeting, the plan is we talked about potentially having a second round this year, but if we did that, it would be another minimum amount of funding. So what we're going to do after this is we're going to wait until next year at this time, and if all goes well and our revenue is back up and the income that we bring in the city is up, we should have a typical full amount of grant funding for next year's cycle, which is somewhere between 600 and 650,000. So then these organizations that apply on a regular basis will be more used to what we're able to do, hopefully, in the future. And that's a big hope. That has a big asterisk on it because we don't know what the future shall bring. I see Darlene has a number. What do we have, Darlene?
So for a quick tally, we are currently up to 267,544. However, we do have a lot of applications that we have passed on that we still need additional information on.
All right, so around 267,000, almost 270. We know for sure we have 8 or 9 more applications that we're still going to respond to. But that's not too bad for where we're at, and I think that the fact that we're focused on doing a $10,000 max kind of helped us. Otherwise, I think we'd have been probably halfway through here and we'd have been out of money. So with that, do we have anybody else that has any comments or questions or anything before we adjourn this meeting? All right, well, with Robert's Rules of Order, we will accept a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
I'm going to go with Marty, second by Andrea. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.